Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our October Parent Speaker Series event, Being Comfortable in the Uncomfortable, How to Talk to Your Kids About Tough Stuff. My name is Chrissy Jimbowski, and I'm the Prevention Program Coordinator at CTC, or Communities That Care of Greater Downingtown. And we're so excited to be able to offer this event and about more or less a monthly event for parents in the Downingtown community in partnership with the Downingtown Area School District. So just to go over some tech tonight, this is a webinar format, so we cannot see you or hear you. However, you can interact with us by submitting questions using at the bottom of your screen. You should see a chat function and a Q&A function to ask questions. So we'll be watching those as we go through tonight and having some time at the end for questions and answers. So please feel free as we go through the content to submit those there. With that, I'm going to pass it to Dr. Beth Ann Sinelli, our Executive Director, to say a few words.
Thanks, Chrissy. Hi, I'm Beth Ann Sinelli, Executive Director of Communities That Care of Greater Downingtown, and I'm also a wellness consultant for the Downingtown Area School District. And I'd also like to welcome you to our parent program this evening. We're very excited that you're joining us for our October meeting. And I'd also like to now introduce to you my colleague and friend, Sarah Brooks.
Beth Ann, my name is Sarah Brooks. I work with Student Assistance Services in the Downingtown Area School District and also very closely with our wellness committees at the advisory level as well as at the building level. For those of you who've joined us for past presentations, I want to thank you for returning. You may have even heard Dr. Benjamin in the past, and we're excited to have her back. And for those of you, if this is your first time joining us, we're certainly appreciative of your time. I think it'll be a worthwhile conversation, and we hope you will join us for future events as well. Chrissy?
Yep. Thanks, Sarah. So just a little bit of information about our speaker tonight. We're so happy to have Dr. Jennifer Benjamin here with us tonight. She actually joined the district a couple years ago, as well as last spring on our panel for our Wellness Reset in May. And so we're very excited she came back tonight to share with us. So Dr. Benjamin completed her doctoral degree in industrial and organizational psychology at Capella University, and she has a master's degree in counseling psychology from Immaculata University, and is also a licensed professional counselor. Currently, she works as the clinical fidelity specialist and trainer for the Philadelphia Child and Family Therapy Training Center. She has multiple training and clinical expertise and specialty certificates. And she formerly worked as an adjunct professor at Rosemont College and was also a clinical director of a large community mental health clinic. So Dr. Benjamin, thank you so much for being here. And I am going to pass it off to you to get started.
All right, buckle up, everybody. You got a lot to cover. So I'm going to share my screen so we can get things rocking and rolling. So, this evening, everybody knows you've signed up for being comfortable with the uncomfortable and having conversations with our children. So the learning objectives that we have for this evening are, we want to be defining what's important about early and often versus hurry up and wait in conversations. We want to understand how to prepare for being uncomfortable in conversations, because, you know, being a parent, I feel like I have uncomfortable conversations every day. And we want to know what do we need to remember in order to have these uncomfortable conversations. So really, I want you guys to be able to leave here tonight with a checklist on what you need to be doing. All right. So classic statements, right? You can tell me anything, right? So we turn to our child and go, you know, you can tell me anything, right? Like, I love you, I'm here for you. And they go, yeah, I know I can, yeah. You know, and then people show up in my office and they say, I just don't understand why they won't talk to me. I told them they could tell me anything, and yet they're not. And so, you know, it's like, gosh, I wonder what's going on. And so what if I told you that they're not talking to you or telling you anything because of what you are doing or what you're not doing, right? It actually is a result of what is happening. The good part about this is that means that I can help you understand what you can change to try to get a different result. So that's the good news about why they're not telling you anything. So I wanted to take a look at this meme. So here we have a child and a caregiver, and they're standing in this water, right? And the child's looking up at the caregiver saying it's deep. And the caregiver is saying, no, it's not deep, right? So I wonder, Chrissy, for example, when you see this meme, what does it lead you to think about, in terms of what's happening here in this picture?
The kid is, if it's a child, kind of like looking to try to communicate their truth and what's happening to them, and kind of their parents like, no, you're fine, dismissive, kind of just like, it's okay, you're fine, it's all right.
Right. So maybe the parent is trying to make it okay, right? Dismiss it, explain it away. Okay. Sarah, if you had to think about from the parent's perspective, right? Because she was saying, well, they see the kids distressed, right? What's another possible interpretation of this?
I think it might also be, sometimes I think we as adults end up a little, I don't want to say disconnected, but I think sometimes we look at the problems that our kids report and we feel like because we've had our own experiences or we've been through some of our own stuff, we kind of, again, sort of minimize the situation or think it's going to be fine. It's not a big deal. Again, kind of dismissing, not really validating. I think the other piece that I look at in this picture is the kid appears to be essentially drowning and the adult is on ground, but there's a lot of space between the two of them. And I think trying to fill that space is always what I think is sometimes hard for us as adults to figure out, find our way through.
The last time I did a training and I showed this meme, somebody said, I think the parent just wants the kid to stand up so they stop drowning. And I said, well, look at that beautiful assumption. You're assuming the kid's not even standing up, right? Yeah. So, but I think this is, part of what happens with parenting, that we assume what the child's saying, and at the same time, we get uncomfortable. We feel a physiological arousal, and ultimately, all humans, when we feel physical distress, our brain automatically says, make it stop. Now, sometimes our brain says, make it stop. And it's like, make it stop now, do whatever you have to do. And so our intensity is much larger. And sometimes our brain's like, oh, that's uncomfortable and awkward, make it stop. And we're like, no, it's not, And so we don't mean to snub or dismiss or not acknowledge. And we're a human and the kids are a human. And so when we feel distress, we have the power in the relationship to act in a way that guarantees us relief in the moment. Although it doesn't really get us closer to where we want to be in our parenting vision or in our relationship with our child. So what ends up happening over and over as the conversations get more intricate and more awkward and the content gets more private and personal and more outside our comfort zone, we speed up our thinking and we become very fast thinkers in the face of being uncomfortable. I see that I got a chat. Oh, that's from Chrissy.
Just me telling people to ask questions as we go.
Yep.
Reminder,
Oh yeah, I'm good at the multitasking. So y'all, it's good, right? I got you. I got my chat box up and ready. So this physiological arousal, this urgency to seek relief speeds us up and creates very fast thinking. The problem with this is that it's very driven by emotion and sits in our middle brain where we don't have any complex problem solving or decision making. And so when we can learn to slow down, it brings us into our front brain. Our front brain is where we do all the, where we can feel emotion, but we pair it with logic, where we can problem solve something even if we're uncomfortable. And I think what we don't understand about parenting is that nobody told us we have to go fast. We just think we have to because we feel it. So we think it's true. And in actuality, we have to slow down to get to our parenting vision faster, right? We have to slow down to build mastery in these uncomfortable conversations. Even though our body is saying, oh my gosh, go as fast as you can, this sucks, right? And so in order to do that, we have to really understand, well, what is the reason I'm going so fast? Where is this coming from? Because nobody in here, I mean, I bet $1, nobody in here is going, I don't, I am a fast parent, right? Everybody's like, what do you mean parenting fast, talking fast conversations? Because we're not aware of it, because it's part of our history and our culture that we grow up in. So when we're growing up, our parents were turning to us, right? Because everybody goes, when I was a kid, I would never talk to my parent that way, and blah 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 blah, right? All this stuff. Well, right, we didn't talk to our parents that way, right? But we also then, what did we do? Well, we would stuff our anxiety. And if we were worried, we wouldn't bring it up because we knew the response we would get. And if we, if we felt triggered or ashamed, and we thought we knew what our parents were going to say habitually back to us, we wouldn't bring it up, right? I mean, we're in essence really talking about that they weren't having the uncomfortable conversations with us, and now we're repeating the same thing, right? But it's really because we're speeding up so fast that we can't slow down enough to have the conversations. So these rules develop across generations of how you have a conversation. Rules develop about how you have an emotion, or that you're allowed to have emotions. I mean, I could go on for an hour about that, right? Because nobody grew up in a family where, if you're the oldest sibling, you're not allowed to have emotions, or men can only feel this emotion and women have these emotions, or, depending on, who's in the house, what emotions you're allowed to have. I mean, these are real things. And what we lose track of is that they impact what we're doing when we're turning to our own children. Rules about how you manage a challenge, and rules about what do you do when things are uncomfortable. Right? What happens what do we do when we're uncomfortable? And ultimately, what we do is we engage our children in a very fast pattern. We speed up, so they speed up. And it forms this negative relationship pattern when things are uncomfortable. So over time, the more uncomfortable things are, the faster we move through, or the more we avoid things. So I know you're all wondering, you all want to know, how do we break the fast pattern? Because really, let's just take a moment here and let's make this valuable for everybody. Why is this valuable and useful? So what I'm saying to you is, if you're a human, and if you're a caregiver, and if you have emotions, which would be all the people signed up for this, then you have the potential, and you do fall into fast thinking. And when that happens, when you speed up, your child speeds up. That means that both of you are dysregulated. So if you can slow down, then they can slow down as well. And there are numerous psychological theories connected to this. So there's scientific proof for all of this, right? So why would we do things that are not scientific? So what we have to do is not only regulate, but this whole notion of prepare to regulate. You know, I think about when I meet with people or work with families, this negative pattern plays out, and eventually there's an explosion, or it's like, right? And then the dust settles. And then when the dust settles, there's this relief, right? Because what did I say? Everybody wants relief. And then we're like, I hope that doesn't happen again. But nobody figures out what to do differently. So then it does happen again. And as kids get older and things get more complex, it speeds up. So when the dust settles, that's when we have to prepare to regulate moving forward, right? The dust settling is usually when we go, oh, my goodness. But that's when we actually have to go, okay, what do I want to do differently next time? Okay. So here are some areas that I usually, like very basic, that I could recommend to anybody to use to prepare to regulate. So first one is breathing. Now, has anybody ever been told to just calm down? Oh, Beth says she has. I don't know if Beth is just giving me a high five or if she has a specific question, but if you have a question, Beth, or a comment, you can put it in the box. But yes, Beth is like, yeah, I have. It is not fun, right? And I have yet to meet anybody in all of my years who said, somebody looked at me and told me to calm down, and just calm just fell right over me like a veil. It was just amazing. No, it doesn't work that way, right? So what we know about our respiration and being regulated. Oh gosh, Beth, right? Yep, it helps so much, doesn't it? Everybody just calm down, right? Now, Beth, so see, you're pulling out the self-disclosure in me. So, you know, I don't believe in teaching things I don't practice. I have a child, you know, when she was 5, my husband and I both work in mental health, behavioral health. She's 5 and she is running this house, right? And we're all like, you need to get her right. You know, we're screaming at her, like, don't yell at us. And I'm just like, we're looking at each other and we're like, this is totally out of control. What is going on, right? And there was this moment where I went to yell at her and she goes, Mommy, why are you going to yell at me if you're just going to say you're sorry later? And I was like, oops, maybe I should practice, but right. And from that moment on, I was like, I shall not be a hypocrite. I do not want to practice this stuff, not practice and tell other people to do it, right? So the first thing I had to work on was my breathing, because part of being emotionally regulated is that your respiration is gentle, light, and even. Sounds simple enough, but here's the thing. Certain emotions will cause your respiration to change. So, for example, when we're angry, we'll have a really swift, deep inhale, right? We'll go, right? Because we're pulling air in, because anger gives us the urge to yell, scream, and fight. So when we're becoming a fast thinker and anger's coming, our respiration will get deeper and faster because it's preparing us to belt our words back at somebody. So other things that can happen with our breathing that impact our ability to regulate, when we are feeling shame or embarrassment, we will hold our breath. Right? Everybody try it. Try holding your breath. Ready? and hold it, keep holding it, right? If you have to breathe by now, you can breathe, but hold it a little bit more. Okay, you can breathe now, right? Everybody, so, and it feels odd because you're not in the throes of being dysregulated, but when we're embarrassed and ashamed, we'll hold our breath. And then when it's time to talk, we go, and we let all this air out. And then our respiration is all over the place because then we have to get all caught back up again. So another thing that can happen with breathing could be that we get really shallow in our breathing and we start breathing in our upper chest. I call that the being chased by a tiger breath, right? Because all of your arousal nervous system that turns on your adrenaline and cortisol, all the nerve endings are right up in here, right? So if you're panicking and your respiration moves up here for too long, you can start turning on your arousal system and really activating yourself emotionally, right? So what we have to learn and part of preparing to regulate, when the dust settles, we think back and we go, was I angry? Was I ashamed? Was I panicked? Right? How was my breathing? And what we want to learn to do is identify that breathing is happening and prepare for that breathing. Prepare to breathe in a gentle, light, even way instead of holding the breath, right? So instead of gasping for deep air, we're going to run through an example at the end of this slide on putting all of this together. But one shortcut I have to give everybody is that if you're holding your breath from shame or embarrassment, drop your jaw, right? It's like literally, everybody hold your breath and then drop your jaw. Because when you drop your jaw, you have to breathe, right? So it's an easy way to get your respiration back on track that doesn't really take much, right? And what it will do is it will interrupt the shame building up in your body, which is very helpful. Okay, so we have an idea about breath and how it's impacting your body, right? So when the dust settles, we're going to have prepared how to breathe, going into the habitual argument when it happens again, or going into these uncomfortable moments that we know are going to come again. And we'll run through that once we get through these components. So the next is your body posture. So whether we like it or not, all of our emotion impacts our body posture, right? So when you're at a meeting and you're annoyed and bored and you're sitting on Zoom, this is what you do, right? So I'm sitting forward, I'm resting my hand, like holding my head up. Or if I'm worried, I'm leaning forward, but very rigid. Or if I'm feeling shame, my shoulders are down and I'm not making eye contact. Or if I'm feeling guilty, I'm trying to I'm staying far away and creating an experience of disconnection from people. With shame, I'm also trying to keep from making eye contact with anybody, because when you feel shame and embarrassment, eye contact feels like the most painful thing in the universe, right? So what we have to think about again is when we were in that uncomfortable moment, what was happening with our posture, right? What was happening emotionally? Were we angry and leaning in? Were we anxious and making these worried faces and going, you can tell me anything, I promise, right? Were we bored? Yeah, you can tell me anything, right? What were we communicating to our bodies and outside of ourselves? So again, if we know with shame, with breath, we opened our jaw. So with body posture, if you want to kick shame's butt, eye contact. Now, I'm telling you right now, you're not going to want to do it. You're going to be like, no, don't think about it. You just count to 3 and go, and you hold it, and you hold it, and you hold it. And the shame will just dissipate, right? Because you've shifted your body posture. You've changed your respiration. Okay, so the next important part to preparing to regulate is your facial expression. Oh man, this is a big one. So here's the thing. Affect regulation theory tells us that when your face moves a millimeter of movement, it's not very much, it changes the chemicals being released in your brain. So you're in an uncomfortable conversation, right? And you're like, you can tell me anything. I promise I won't get mad. For some reason, they don't trust us, right? And so our facial expression will shift. And right then and there, I mean, everybody could tell I was angry because my face moved down and out, right? And that's going to impact the anger I feel, which then impacts my body posture, which then deepens and makes more rapid my breathing. And then all of a sudden, I'm thinking so fast, I can't regulate. And I can't tolerate to be in this uncomfortable conversation with my child. So remember, we were talking about the history and the culture we grow up in, right? So if I get angry in uncomfortable conversations, whenever they come up, that's not a coincidence. You probably faced a very similar experience growing up. If I, as a parent, get worried or awkward in the face of uncomfortable conversations, that's not a coincidence. My parent looked at me with a facial expression and a body posture and a type of breathing that created this patterned way of interacting. And now I'm passing it down. I'm repeating it. So what we want to do in this preparation, right, when the dust settles and we identify what was the big emotions I just had that were bossing me around. So that way I can prepare to do something different. So what I want to do is do an example of this using anger, right? Because as parents, we deal with anger and frustration and annoyance and irritation. All those are anger words, right? So if you're frustrated, annoyed, irritated, it's anger. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to stand up and we're going to try this out because we have to prepare. Preparing means practicing, right? You're not just going to magically do it. You've been trying that. It doesn't magically happen without practice. Okay, so I'm going to stand up and invite y'all to do it with me. Okay, so I'm pushing my chair back. Okay, so let's pull together all these components using anger. So the dust settles, and when the dust is settling, I have this thought. My big emotion was anger, and it was really bossing me around. So I know that in that moment when I got angry, I was attacking. I wanted to yell, scream, and fight. So when we get really angry and it's bossing us around, what happens is we step forward and we breathe really deep. So everybody try it right now, though. Right? Like you're about to scream something back, right? Like, ah, right? Like, you see what I'm saying? When we get angry. Now, you're going to say, well, this is so unrealistic and silly. It doesn't make any sense. Well, of course you feel that way because you're not having big emotions right now, right? You're having fun adult time on a talk on a Monday night. So it's going to feel like you're going to think, well, this isn't real. It is real. This is what happens. You're just not in the mindset, okay? So we're in our angry mindset and we go, ah, right? And we, oh, look at that, right, Karen? And you lean forward when you're yelling at your dog for barking. So because I know I have to work on my breath and my posture and my facial expression, what I do is I'm prepared that if I step forward and take a deep breath, instead, I'm going to step back and I'm going to let the air out without talking. Because the opposite to yelling is releasing the air without saying anything. Right? So everybody, I'm going to show it to you and then I want you to try it. Okay, everybody try it a couple times. All right. So you create the opposite opportunity by stepping back and releasing the air. So we've changed our posture and we've changed our breath. So the other part would be our facial expression. So a really great shortcut for facial expression would be that learning what it feels like to be in a neutral facial expression, right? So ready? I'm going to come closer. So here's subneutral. Here's neutral. And here's above neutral. Now, unfortunately, most people in our society sit subneutral. You ever feel like you're having a blah day? I don't know why my day's so blah. I just feel like it's very blah right now. That's because how we've literally been trained to sit like that. So what I encourage people to do when you step back and you exhale, because you're doing the opposite to the big emotion of anger, is that we just put on, I call it a half smile, right? You're just above neutral. So when your facial muscles get tired of holding that position, instead of sinking into the abyss and getting angry again, we get from above neutral to neutral. So, right, everybody try it. Just go just above a neutral face, just ever so slightly. So we exhale, we step back, we shift our facial expression, because then what that's going to do is give us the opportunity to reflect instead of just correcting, right? Think about that meme back at the beginning, right? Here we go. He corrected. And maybe his intent was for his child to know they could just stand up. I get it, right? And if we're having such big emotions that we can't tolerate the uncomfortable conversation, so are they, right? And so the difference is that our frontal lobe, again, is fully formed and we can tolerate this, but they can't. So if we don't demonstrate for them how to slow down and regulate, they are not going to magically do it. And if they do, if somehow they keep it together, it's out of self-control, which unfortunately, you only wake up with so much self-control every day. Like, again, scientifically proven that regulation, emotion regulation, is a learned skill that you can prepare for and build mastery in. Self-control, like you holding it together, you wake up with a certain capacity of self-control, and if you use it all day, you will come back home and have none left to give. It's not a lack of trying, it's just there isn't any. So if you guys spent the morning getting out to the bus, everybody used all their self-control, good luck that night, right? It's not gonna go well. So when we can stay regulated and prepare to regulate, it gives us the opportunity to build the vision in our parenting and the relationship we want to have, which becomes so important because the conversations don't get easier the older kids get. and they have access to so much instant knowledge, comments, behaviors, thoughts, impulsive decisions, destructive decisions, access to drugs, access to legal synthetic drugs, being able to make poor impulsive decisions about what they're doing with their bodies, what they're posting. And so things just get more complex. So what we have to be able to do is, in preparing to regulate, we change our emotional response. So it puts us in our slow thinking. So then we can start taking advantage of when these conversation opportunities come up, even if they're super uncomfortable and they're things we didn't want to talk about that day. Conversations we weren't ready to have yet. Because I would say most of my uncomfortable conversations that came up weren't the ones I was trying to prepare for. Like I was like, oh, this conversation is totally coming down the pipe, right? No, something totally different. And it doesn't, like, being a therapist doesn't make it any easier. If anything, my daughter's like, I'm not one of your clients. Don't talk to me like that, right? So now that we're regulated, we can start building the vision and actually creating a relationship where when we say, you can tell me anything, you look like they can tell you anything, you sound like they can tell you anything, you're breathing like they can tell you anything, instead of breathing like a fiery dragon from the abyss of hell, right? Like, they don't buy it. So what happens though, the moment comes, and it's always earlier than we hope, where some uncomfortable conversation comes up, and we go and think about, if we are silent in the face of that conversation, or if we're angry in the face of that conversation, what message does that brand to your child about difficult topics? Right? The first time the elementary student, a client, call him James, said to his mommy, why do girls have what I don't have? Or why don't girls have what I have, right? And the mom's like, I wasn't ready for that. So I changed the topic. And I said, I hear you. What message does that send your child? Now, and if it aligns with your beliefs as a family and your rules and expectations as a family, then, that's important. Everybody's got to have their belief system. But if your response sends the message that talking about, the difference between male and female genitalia is voodoo, if that's the message, fine. But if that's not the message you want to send, that's the one you just sent, right? If you respond by, I've had parents who just, get quiet for 15 seconds and then change the topic. Act like it wasn't even said, put the radio on. What kind of message does that send? Right? I wonder, Chrissy, I know you and I spent a lot of time preparing for this. I wonder what your, if you're having any specific thoughts as I'm just starting to bring up this topic of early and often.
No, well, you mean one thought I had, I don't know if this is what you're looking for. Of course, now my mind goes blank with examples, but I'm sure I've experienced this but I think the thing as you were going through, it just makes me think of, I think so many parents and probably a lot of folks that are watching right now have this thought of I want to parent my kids differently than I was parented. And it's just, you don't realize how intentional you have to be, how much it really takes a lot of thought, because it's so easy to fall back and without even realizing it, without even wanting to do this, repeat the same cycles over and over again. So just sitting here, it's I feel like there probably is like a certain sense of guilt, like, okay, one more thing I have to learn to do and all these things. Do you know what I mean? Like, but at this time also, like, you really have to be intentional. Like, it does take practice and work, but it'll get easier as you go and get more into the routine of doing it.
Right. And I think the thing about having a conversation early and often instead of like waiting and waiting and waiting, and then it being so epically huge and it almost feels like you can't even address it.
Yep.
With early and often, typically, you know, if we say to you, there's like this universal where you're going to feel awkward and not want to talk about it, right? If everybody sits back, right, close your eyes and just take 5 seconds to think about feeling awkward and uncomfortable and not knowing what to say, right? Everybody just think about, conjure up that experience of being awkward and not knowing what to say. Ooh, it's making my heart flutter. See, we've all had that at some point already. And what I'm saying is, we just are going to stick with preparing for it, right? So if we're regulated, then when we feel that awkward, I don't want to talk about it, that means don't move past the topic until you slow yourself down, right? So James says, why don't girls have what I have? So I said, okay. Can you say, that's an important question, let me think about it? Buy yourself a couple seconds and then say, you know, say your answer that fits with your beliefs. Are you going to say something, Sarah?
I was going to say, I think sometimes we have to give ourselves permission to not know the answer. And I think, to be truthful, a lot of times over the years in working with students who sometimes have said something that I wasn't maybe prepared for or didn't have a formal response for, a lot of times I would sit in the space of, I need you to give me a minute. Like, I'm trying to process what you just shared. And so I think sometimes we as adults really have to give ourselves permission to sort of sit in that place, which is not the most comfortable, and be okay with it rather than trying to like completely avoid it or rush through it, as you've already kind of eloquently spoken to sometimes our habits.
Yeah, and let's think about like the application of this, right? So let's say we have a middle schooler, and April, I see your comment, so I'll get to that. Let's say we have a middle schooler, right? And, you know, I've always had some, you know, parent comes in and goes like, you know, let's say the daughter's name is Molly, right? Or no, excuse me, let's say, yeah, Molly said like, you know, Sally's such a liar. She said she's smoking her mom's marijuana, right? And it's like, right? It's like, what is it? And it's like awkward. I don't know what to say. Then it's like, okay, gotta regulate. I gotta slow down. That's a really important comment. Even if it doesn't totally fit, it still slowed things down enough that you're not moving past it, right? And you can still address like, wow, do a lot of kids smoke, do a lot of kids smoke their parents' marijuana? Is that what's happening right now in middle school? Is that what, you know, the word on the street is? Mom, you're so uncool. You know, nobody talks that way, right? But we're showing and we're breathing, we're showing our body posture, our big emotions are in a place where the child believes we can talk about it. Again, I'm not saying that you should throw your beliefs and rules of your house out the window. But if they don't talk to you about it, they're going to Google it. They're going to get advice from TikTok. They're going to get advice from Tumblr or Snapchat, right? I mean, they're going to go find it if they can't talk about it with you. And you really have to decide, would I rather them sit in this awkwardness with me and us learn how to do this together, or just have them Google answers. Oh, that sounds terrifying, right? Let's see. I just want to get to these before they stack up. Okay. I feel like I yell at my kids every day. So I'm looking at April. Say more about what expectations I should have regarding what a 13-year-old boy's brain is capable of processing. Well, good old 13-year-old boys. So without totally knowing what you're talking about, I would say that there's, like, in terms of what you mean processing, I would say that there's a difference between somebody being unwilling and somebody being unable, right? So if somebody's unwilling, they're having big emotions. There's something happening for them. And typically with 13-year-old boys, I think a very under-addressed emotion is anxiety. In teenage boys, anxiety can come out as being very super quiet, or explosive anger, explosive irritability, and not being able to sleep well at night. So then they're sleeping in very extensively the next day because they can't get themselves to sleep. So I think that with, when we think about somebody being unwilling, is there a big emotion going on that's keeping them from being able to be in their front brain? Because teenagers spend a lot of time in their raw emotion in their middle brain, which is why they bring up these awkward, uncomfortable conversations, because they're ruminating about what's happening or hasn't happened during their day, and who's doing what and what's the drama, right? Now, so that would be unwilling. Unable could be, depending on how they're, where they're at with their emotional development. What have with a 13-year-old boy, I would think about the other males in their life. How have they demonstrated what emotional processing looks like? How do they manage their emotions? Are they actually replicating what they see, even though a 13-year-old boy wouldn't know they're doing that, because they don't have the capacity to be that self-aware. They only have the capacity to want to rule the world, right? And be in charge. So I think when we're thinking about a 13-year-old boy, are the people around them, are the people who are modeling for them, demonstrating what we want the boy to be able to do? Because very often, an unruly teenage boy will be the scapegoat for other problems that are occurring in a family system. Let's see, Ashley. One of my mentors talked about matching the intensity without matching the emotion. For example, man, I can tell this is big. Yeah, so somebody brings up something, a conversation that's uncomfortable, maybe a high school kid says to you, why can't we be alone in the basement or my bedroom? Nothing's going to happen. I promise, right? And we just want to correct it and be like, no, I know what happens, right? But instead, what we want to do is slow down and, right, wow, this is really important to you. You spent a lot of time thinking about it, because I hear you really trying to come up with a good argument for, to have this conversation with me. What's behind this? What's going on for you? And maybe it leads into a conversation about sex and petting and groping and making out, and maybe it doesn't this time. And you've left the door open for the conversation to continue. Right? Instead of them getting false information or having that conversation somewhere else. Now, if you'd like them to have the conversation with Alexa and Google, I mean, that is an option in present day that can be set up, right? Let's see, Steve, we recently had a conversation with our grandson about Instagram-inspired school bathroom destruction. Oh, man. Grandpa added a question about kids in the middle school vaping. 12-year-old grandson, nobody vapes in our school. Grandpa says people who develop a drug problem usually start in middle school. We set the stage for early and often. He will at some point say yes, a few kids vape. Exactly. That's exactly what we're talking about, right? So being regulated, slowing yourself down, and being able to lean into the conversation. You know, if they're talking about drugs or vaping, don't explain it away. Make a comment about it. Ask about it. See what gets put on the table. See how they respond. And often when you do this, as you continue to keep the conversation going, a kid will turn you out of nowhere and say, yeah, I guess there are some people who vape. Yeah, you know, she's not the only one who says she's using her mom's marijuana. I feel like I'm the only one who doesn't smoke. Right? I mean, these things will come up. And again, when your kid goes, I feel like I'm the only one who doesn't smoke, you don't, it's like, oh God, what do I say to that? Oh my God, what do I do? Slow down. That's really important. I'm glad you're sharing that with me. Tell me more about it. Right? Sometimes it's not that complex. It's just that we think so fast, we can't get through it. Right? We panic. So another thing that we can do, in addition to this early and often, instead of avoiding it, right, and waiting till it's huge, is stop asking predictable questions and start working on having a predictable relationship that, again, fosters this you can tell me anything, or we know how to talk to each other interaction, right? That it doesn't seem so foreign. So right now, if I said to everybody, quick, put the questions in the chat box we ask our kids when they get home from school. Go. They're going to say, what'd you do today? How was school? Do you have any homework? Did you learn anything? Can you say anything other than no or yes? Those are the 5 questions that come up, right? And instead, what we want to be able to do is foster the relationship and increase our ability to talk with each other outside of these uncomfortable moments. So the uncomfortable becomes a little more tolerable every time. And so what we can do is encourage people through having other questions prepared or that we've thought about in our mind. Now, for some of you, you might go, I can't remember these questions. All right. You can take a picture of it. If you were on your phone looking at it, your kid's not going to flinch. Everybody looks at their phone all the time, right? Or, I mean, why can't we put the questions, print them out, put them in a bowl, and pick one out and ask it every day, or at dinner time, or at breakfast, or when they get home from school? You know, think about if you have elementary age children, if they get to pick a question and you get to pick a question and you start this process, right? Or if you're somebody who does drop off and pick up at middle school and the drop off and pick up line, right? Maybe you have a different question every day, or maybe you have the same question. Oh my gosh, it's so great to see you. What made you smile today? Well, I'll tell you what didn't make me smile, right? And then you go, ah! And you go, oh, Dr. Benjamin said, slow down, breathe. Sounds important. Gosh, what happened? Right? But, you know, this way, we don't have to ask the same question. How was your day? Good. Do you have any homework? No. And then silence. Because it's not building a relationship, but we're just doing what we learned growing up. Right? So this way we learn how to listen when the other person's talking. And again, we keep building our relationship towards engaging with each other more often and more frequently, and tolerating a closeness with each other. All right. So having these uncomfortable conversations, building mastery in them, it's going to require you to slow your mind and body, So here's our checklist, right? So you need to understand how your past experiences with you growing up and your parent-child relationship or caregiver relationship, how does that inform your fast patterns, right? If your parent didn't know what to do in these moments, you're not going to magically know what to do in these moments just because you're a parent. Make sure you reflect before you correct. Don't be the caregiver in the puddle going, no, it's not, right? Hear what they're saying. And I always encourage people to parent their child. Sometimes we do just have to parent. But this way, it doesn't have to be every single time they're being shot down, criticized, explained away, or snubbed because we're fast thinking. Prepare to regulate. So you're not going to be perfect, but if the explosion happens and the dust will settle, think back to what was the big emotion that took me out? Was I frozen in fear? Was I attacking in anger? Was I so embarrassed I couldn't even look at my child because if they said, their body part one more time, I was going to pass out, right? Did I not know what to do because they brought up heroin or opioids or sex, right? We'll prepare for it, right? And it's okay. Sometimes in preparing, we go, this is what I would have said. You know what? Go back. Say, hey, you know what? I was thinking about what you said. It's actually a really important topic. This is my thought. I wonder what you think. You can go back. There's no rules that you're not allowed to. We don't go back because it evokes shame and embarrassment. But if we regulate, we can go back and correct it. I wonder what message that sends. I think that sends that we can make mistakes and go back, and we can have big emotions and still have conversations. Ooh, that sounds like it aligns probably with your parenting vision. Have conversations early and often. Keep planting the seeds, right? I know it's different than how we were raised. And there is so much going on right now. We don't want them to be turning to other sources. We want to be their primary source and their natural support. Have a predictable relationship, one that's available. Put your phone down. Ask them what made them smile that day. And ask specific in context, right? If you have a child who gets disorganized easily and often has big emotions, say, what did you like in math class today? Right? What did you eat at lunch? What happened in gym class? Give it specific context so that way they can search for some information for you. And finally, if you can't or don't change what you're doing, you will get the same response from them every time. And they will replicate the pattern of running away from uncomfortable conversations just like we do, because we're all humans. So if we don't, they won't. All right. So I would encourage everybody to, if you haven't already, check us out on Facebook at PCFTTC or on Instagram at philafamily.com, because every day it's like we're giving away free knowledge about being in a family. And Chrissy always says our knowledge is on fire. We have some really amazing posts, don't we?
You do. I will say, I love all those, it's just easy things you can do right away. And even I was going to chime in and say, that it's like themes of things that you kind of to-dos to do and stuff that I'll take with me to use immediately is a lot of everything you're saying is just open-ended questions. So like, instead of how was your day, it's like specific, but everything's open-ended. Or even with simple things of, and I'm trying to do this more too. It's so easy if your kid's like, hey, can I watch a show? Can I go outside? Can I do this? Like, it's a lot of times you can default to the no of just, it's okay to, even when it's not an uncomfortable topic, but just to practice that. hang on a second, I need to think about that. Or is something that they say to you, offhand, just having those leading questions of, that sounds important to you, tell me more. Like just those little key phrases to have are so significant. And because they include all the things you taught, like validation and creating those connections and those types of things. So those simple things really do.
Yeah. I also try to take advantage of when I'm not dysregulated and my daughter asks me something, I'll just say, I'll give you an answer later. I need to think about it. So I create that pattern when I have more self-control. So then when I get really tripped up on something and I say that to her, it's not very surprising.
So, okay. So I'm looking at, we don't have any questions and you were answering a lot of them actually, as we went through. We have, always like a term, whatever.
Oh, okay.
Just a thank you, just a shout out. You're welcome. Thank you.
Oh yeah. Thanks for coming.
Yeah. So, no, I think this was great. I mean, I have lots of tips and things right away to walk away with this from. So thank you so much, Dr. Benjamin, for sharing all of your knowledge with us tonight. And I am going to go ahead actually and pass it back to Dr. Sinelli to close us.
I'm here. Hey, thank you, Dr. Benjamin. Thank you so much. And I'd like to thank everyone who joined us this evening for our program. I truly believe that you were able to gain a lot of helpful information. And I was sitting here as a parent now of a 27 and 24-year-old. And congratulating myself for some of the things I did correctly, but then also going, oh, can I just get that back again? And but I will say I have had my older children remember some of these more explosive moments and conversations that we've had, where we've sat down and sort of laughed about them now, and also they've apologized for perhaps what wasn't some of our best behavior during those conversations. So as adult children, it's very interesting to see their perspective on those times where I say, I didn't say that. I did not act like that. They're like, oh no, you really did, Mom. So I have to, and so it was extremely helpful, and I very much appreciate that. So thank you to Dr. Benjamin and all of you who joined us tonight. And please remember that this program is recorded. Also, you can go to Communities That Care of Greater Downingtown to our website, Facebook, Instagram for information on this program and others. We have a program coming up on November 9th with Kim Porter from Be a Part of the Conversation. And that program will look specifically, it's called the Mock Teen Bedroom. So we're going to look in greater detail at signs and symptoms of substance use and some very helpful conversations around behavior, adolescent behavior and drug use. And then also we will be partnering with the school district in December. So that program will also be focusing on mental health and suicide prevention, and that will be on December 7th. So you will get flyers and information about that, and I hope you'll continue to support and join and share this with your family and friends in the community. So thank you to everyone. We'll see you hopefully in November.